Hello, this is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. President Biden has said that the latest outbreak of tornadoes in the United States, which have hit 6 states and killed dozens of people, is one of the largest in its history. Speaking in his home state of Delaware, Mr Biden told a news conference that his and the First Lady's thoughts were with all those affected.
Jill and I pray, and I sincerely mean this, pray for those who've lost loved ones and for those who are uncertain of the fate of their loved ones and the debris that you see scattered all over the hurricane's path. They lost their homes, they lost their businesses, and it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And we still don't know how many lives are lost or the full extent of the damage.
President Biden has declared a state of emergency in Kentucky, where more than 100 people may have died. Mr Biden said the federal government would do everything it could to help communities recover from what he called an unimaginable tragedy. Peter Bowes reports on the aftermath.
The scale of the devastation is extraordinary. Entire towns have been reduced to piles of rubble. In the Kentucky city of Mayfield, about 110 people were working overnight in a candle factory when the tornado struck, completely destroying the building. Only 40 people have been found alive. A huge search and rescue operation is continuing. The conditions facing the authorities are hugely challenging. Tens of thousands of people are without power and water. The police station in Mayfield was destroyed and firefighters lost equipment, hampering their efforts to deal with the destruction.
The top US diplomat for Europe is to travel to Ukraine and Russia for talks about Moscow's huge military build-up on the Ukrainian border. The US State Department says Karen Dronfried will reiterate to Russia Washington's commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. The US Embassy in El Salvador says it has handed over to a local court documents that could help bring justice to the victims of a notorious massacre of civilians during the country's civil war. More than 800 people, half of them children, were tortured and killed by a special anti-insurgency army unit. More details from our America's regional editor, Leonardo Rocha.
You had a battalion, a new unit formed by the El Salvador army, trained in the United States and armed by the United States at the time by the Reagan administration, to combat the recently formed or recently unified guerrillas, the left-wing groups. And they had information that in the area, the local people were supporting the rebels. So what did they do? They went to El Mozote, a village there, and they just rounded up people during 4 days, and they separated the mothers from the children, and they killed everyone.
This is the World News from the BBC in London. People in the Pacific Territory of New Caledonia are voting in a referendum on independence from France. This is the third and final poll intended to conclude a decolonisation process which began in the French Overseas Territory more than 30 years ago. 2 previous votes in 2018 and 2020 rejected independence. Pro-independence campaigners are boycotting the vote, calling for it to be postponed to give Indigenous Kanaks time to mourn those who have died during the pandemic. Any decline in French influence in the region could benefit the growing power of China. A Supreme Court judge in Brazil has ruled that foreign visitors will need to produce a COVID vaccination certificate in order to enter the country. The ruling invalidates controversial regulations issued previously by the health regulators, who demanded only a negative PCR test for foreigners arriving in the country. Brazil's lenient COVID regulations had turned the country into a major destination for non-vaccinated tourists. In Formula One, Max Verstappen has qualified in pole position for Sunday's final title-deciding Grand Prix. He'll start the race in Abu Dhabi, 1 place ahead of his rival, Lewis Hamilton. Jack Nicholls reports.
In the most crucial qualifying session of the season, it was Max Verstappen that came out on top. Initially, it looked as though he was struggling. In the second part of qualifying, he had a lockup, meaning he won't start the race on the medium tyres tomorrow. He'll be on the softs, different to Hamilton. But in the final part of qualifying, he was unstoppable. 0.3 of a second quicker than Hamilton, and it will be the 2 title protagonists on the front row once again for a winner-takes-all battle.
The 4-time African Footballer of the Year, Samuel Eto'o, has described being elected the president of the Cameroon Football Federation as one of the proudest moments of his life. The former Barcelona, Inter Milan and Chelsea striker secured more votes than the acting president. BBC News.